Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So I really wanted to talk about episode 2 of The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon season 2 and also kind of episode 3 as well. Mostly focus on, I guess, the ending scene of episode 2 and where we saw Carol and then, I guess where that could go for episode 3 and whatnot. Is she going to be one of the experiments for the super walkers, and are we going to see a lot of the super walkers in episode 3? So yeah, before we go any further, make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. I will say, in terms of the super walker storyline and my expectations for the season, I don't think the super walkers are going to be a big part of season 3. I don't even think they're going to really be a part of season 3 at all. I do think variant walkers are still going to be a thing in season 3 and 4, but it's not going to be the super walkers that we see in season 2. And the reason why I say that is because I do think that Madame Genet and the Pouvoir storyline is likely going to end here in season 2. I mean, there's a lot of cast information for season 3, right? A lot of information has come out, and obviously I haven't really talked about any of the, new cast for The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon season 3. I'm sort of waiting a little bit because we're obviously very focused on season 2 right now. But I really think that in season 3 we are going to see variant walkers still, but it's not going to be the super walkers that we see here. There will be different type of walkers, because I think if you ignore the whole super walker element, honestly, I just think that it's not going to be as exciting unless you really do other things, I would say, for The Walking Dead. Then maybe it could be exciting, but I don't know. I think that in terms of the super walker storyline, it's going to be something that probably ends here in season 2, and I do hope that, in terms of how they end that storyline, that it's done really well. But I think for season 3 there will be something else that's going to be there, because I mean, you always have to sort of make the walkers really exciting, and obviously that's really one element to The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon that has been the most exciting, right? And for season 2, you have Carol coming back and all of that, and that reunion, what are you going to make really exciting about a season 3, right? And obviously, they always make things really exciting. There's always things to look forward to. So is there a possibility that certain characters could, I guess, show up, from the Commonwealth? There's a lot of questions I have about The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon season 3, but obviously in about a month from now, that'll be our focus and whatnot, right? So yeah, but let's talk about the ending scene here. So we do see Carol, obviously, after first arriving to France, she ends up with Pouvoir, and basically right away is captured by them and taken to, I guess, wherever Pouvoir is, right? To wherever, I guess, Madame Genet is. And it's really exciting because I think that doing a lot of that, I mean, that's the thing, a lot of the shots in the trailers, I'm always thinking happens in later episodes. But the one thing about these episodes is that we get so much in each episode. And I think that's why each episode honestly has been really great to watch. Even though in The Walking Dead, we would still get really amazing moments, but there would be bottle episodes here and there, which honestly isn't really necessarily a bad thing. Bottle episodes, sometimes, as boring as they can be, sometimes they're honestly really great. It just really depends on the writing and, I guess, what story you have, I guess, for that episode, right? Sometimes they're really, honestly, they can work really well. So I think that we're going to see a lot here in episode 3. And I think Carol's story is going to be really focused on, learning about the super walkers and also, I guess, meeting Madame Genet. I do think we're going to see some of her backstory and whatnot. And I actually think that, wherever the story goes, and we'll talk about that here in the video, but I think that Carol is eventually, in this episode, is going to be a part of the experiments for the super walkers. And so we do see Carol. She's obviously taken somewhere. She's going to meet Cadron. I think a lot of that's going to be really exciting. Honestly, just Carol and Cadron meeting for the first time is going to be really cool. I do wonder what the reveal in terms of Cadron's story is going to be there. I think that eventually he does get away from Pouvoir, but I don't know, does it happen in that episode? Maybe not. I don't know where the story is going there, but she is going to learn from Cadron, I guess, where Daryl is. And I don't know if Cadron's going to say anything right away, but maybe Carol has to sort of explain, who she is. But that's the thing too, is if she says too much, what if Cadron just goes and tells Genet, right? I think that's one of the things that, in terms of the realistic conversations that they have there, I do want to see, I guess, where their mindsets are, because for both characters in that scene, they both can't really trust each other, right? I just think that if they trusted each other very fast, then that would be an issue in the episode that obviously I will point out. So I think that that's going to be really cool. But we did see a shot in the trailer that came out a couple of weeks ago, and you see Madame Genet, and she seemingly makes this order or something like that and takes out a whole group of people, and it seems like afterwards they're all turned into I guess into super walkers. And I think that that makes sense in terms of, where the storyline is going to go here. So I don't know where that goes for Carol specifically. There is a shot where Carol is on the ground, and it looks like whatever just happened where everyone was taken out, somehow Carol survived this. And I will say, depending on how the scene plays out, I am really interested in that, because the way it plays out has to make sense. If Carol somehow survives just randomly out of everyone, that's going to be really ridiculous, right? So I do want to see how that plays out, because the one thing that I really do focus on, and I know some don't really focus on that, but I really focus on that, and that is just, how real can all of this be here? And I think that you want it to be as realistic as possible. So if Carol somehow survives this, and if this happens in episode 3, it's got to be believable. And the reason why I think it's got to be believable is because it makes the characters relatable, right? So I think that that's something that, if this is what's happening here, then I hope that it just overall makes sense. But I think Carol, seeing, I don't even know if this is going to be the first time she sees the Superwalkers, though, because there's a shot in the episode 3 trailer where you see her looking through like something or whatever. It looks like she's like held captive somewhere. Again, the trailer could be cut in a way where maybe she's not looking at the Superwalkers. Like, the trailer almost makes you think that she's looking at the Superwalkers turning, right? So maybe that's not what's happening at all here, and it's just sort of cut that way. So maybe, when it happens at nighttime, it's the first time she's seeing the Superwalkers, but she is going to learn of the Superwalkers, it seems like, in episode 3. So I'm excited to see how exactly that plays out here. But Carol being in this scene here, I think obviously she's going to survive. And then I think after this, she'll probably end up, I guess finding a horse somewhere, because I think that's how she gets away from all of this. And then I think Pouvoir will still catch her in the end, though. And then I really don't know where things go for Carol. Like, I honestly have a hard time predicting where the story is eventually going to go. I know that Daryl and Carol, based off of the trailer anyways, they eventually do reunite, and they're like outside, it's during the day, and so maybe that's episode 5, or maybe that's episode 6. Honestly, I think they reunite before episode 5, so I do think it's going to happen either in 3 or 4, because we have a lot of shots where we see the characters together, or we know that they're going to be together in the scene based off of other trailers that came out. And so if that's, episode 5 and 6, say they reunite in 4 at least, then yeah, I think 3 is going to be really focused on Carol learning about Pouvoir and Madame Genet and the Superwalkers, and then for Daryl's story is going to be really focused on the Nest and some of what's happening with Laurent right now, right? I can see how a lot of the story here is going to end up together going into episode 4 and 5. And yeah, I'm really excited for that. But Carol's story seems to be really, as I was saying, learning about Madame Genet, the experiments there, the Superwalkers and all of that. And I think that Madame Genet could get a backstory. Like, we are going to see that at some point here. I remember there being early reviews, and there was some mention of some of the backstory and whatnot, and there was a reference actually to the episode that it happens in, and I don't remember if it was episode 3 or 4. I think it was one of those episodes, and so at some point we're going to learn Madame Genet's backstory. It could be happening in episode 3. I'm really curious on that, because learning the connections as to why Madame Genet decides, like, we're going to create Superwalkers, and like, why is she using the Superwalkers, just some of the connections there. I'm really, really excited to just learn more about that. I don't know if there's any connections to Dr. Jenner and whatnot, and honestly, if there's no connections to Dr. Jenner and whatnot, then I really will be very disappointed, and I'll do a video talking about all that, because I think that you have to make some sort of connection here with the Superwalkers. Like, the Superwalkers were really an exciting story, and I just think that, the way that they were revealed overall with that post-credits scene, like, if it just ends in a way where they're really irrelevant to the story and it really doesn't matter, definitely really disappointing. So I'll do a video, and yes, I'll be very negative about that, but I gotta be honest, right? So yeah, I'm excited for episode 3 though. I think that we will learn a lot more about the Superwalker origins here, either in this episode or in episode 4. I think Carol will be a part of the experiments for sure, because it just makes sense. Like, you're not gonna allow 20 people, or however many people they had, to be allowed, I guess in Madame Genet's place, or wherever Pouvoir is staying, right? Like, you're not gonna do that, right? Like, I think you take people here and there because you're using them as experiments, and so I think that's what we're going to see here. Carol's obviously going to survive, but I just think learning of all of this here, and then I guess, I don't know if that's where you can get into an origin story for Madame Genet, and then maybe that'll explain some of the Superwalker stuff. In episode 3 or 4, it seems like it's going to happen, and I'm excited. I do think these episodes are going to be really great. I've been hearing a lot of really amazing things about episode 4, so I'm so excited about that episode. But yeah, I'll leave it here. I did a video earlier actually on The Ones Who Live season 2, and a lot of discussion on whether or not we were going to get an announcement for season 2 of, I guess, that show, or whether or not it's going to be a new series. Basically, Rick and Michonne's next story, but I do think it's probably going to be season 2 of The Ones Who Live. And a lot of the response that I've seen so far is really like, I don't want The Ones Who Live season 2, because I don't want the story to be focused on Rick and Michonne. I want to see Rick, I guess, basically not being a part of this epic love story. And again, I think a season 2 is not going to be focused on that. I think the focus for season 1 was obviously that, because you had to have those characters, find each other and whatnot. So I think that's why that was the focus. But I think for season 2, it's not going to be that at all. They'll be focused more on survival horror, I think, because Andrew Lincoln's talked about that. Scott Gimple has talked about doing more classic Walking Dead stories. And, there's been a lot of focus focus on just a lot of that. So I think that's where that's going to go overall. So that's why I'm excited about that. And I think a season 2 would honestly be really great because you could fix some of the CRM story there. You could really, I think after watching season 1, if you were to watch season 2 right away and the story continued from that point, maybe you do a time jump of like a year or two or something. And, you see Rick and how he's settled into everything, right? Into Alexandria and the Commonwealth. And I think that would be a really cool story there. And I think that would make a lot of sense for a season 2. And then something would come up for the story that would be really exciting. You would have to have reunions with other characters and all of that. I think it's going to happen at some point. The actors definitely seem very interested and very excited to do that. I think they are working on the story right now. Denai Guerrera's comments regarding The Walking Dead lately seem to really hint at that. And I just think that that's sort of where we're at. And I think an update of, we're working on this, or we're sort of talking about this, or like, we'll have to wait and see. I can't really say anything right now. Something like that would be really exciting. And obviously Denai Guerrera saying that's exciting already, because you're like, wait, that's really interesting, right? But I think that if Scott Gimple said that, right? Because Scott Gimple, we already know how he talks about some of this stuff here. But if he does say, I can't really say anything about that right now, that right there would be really, really telling on like the whole status of everything, right? Like it seems like they are working on stuff, but they're just not really ready to announce stuff. Because remember, and I've said this a lot, like the ones who live, or at least Denai Guerrera and Andrew Lincoln, the way they've announced everything with that show, it's always been surprises. It's always been very random, and they would just like show up here and there and announce this. Like it's honestly always been that. It's never been like this whole build to like something being announced or anything like that. It's honestly always been just very like random. Like here's the trailer, or like here's this announcement, or like, you know what I mean? So I think that it's going to be something like that. They're going to be very, very quiet, very, very secretive until they're ready to make the announcement. Once they have the story down, once they're very excited about that and everyone's like, yes, let's do that, then they'll announce it. And I think the story is very much going to be focused on more reunions, because I think that's obviously something that everyone wants to do. I think eventually this whole story is going to end in the next like 5 or 6 years, and then eventually they'll go on to a different story or whatever. But within the next couple of years here, I think that the focus really will be on reuniting all of the characters. And I think the final reunion with everyone really is going to be Rick and Daryl. So I think that eventually they're going to get to that point where they actually, do that story. But that's going to be the very ending of all of this. And I don't see that show or whatever that's going to be being like the next story here. I really feel like there's going to be another story to tell before we get to that, which is something that maybe, a lot of fans don't want to hear, because I see that all the time. I see that comment of like Rick and Daryl. I want to see them reunite, this and that. But I think we're going to have to wait a little bit before we see that. I think they're going to hint at things and tease things, and, we'll get connections to this and that and how it's going to play out. But I think we're going to have to wait a bit here. I think that, Rick and Michonne are going to reunite with like Morgan and some of the other characters in Alexandria. I think we're going to get another story more focused on simplistic survival horror, because that's the one thing that Andrew Lincoln wanted to see, right? He wants to see that aspect to it. And I think that for Daryl to come back into the story's going to get much bigger. And I think having Daryl come back into the story, having the other characters from Dead City and whatnot come back into the story's going to get very big. And so I think that you can't really do simplistic survival horror if you're going to have all of those characters together. Again, you can still have that survival element there, but it would just be very different. And so if they want to focus on that first, I think there's a way you could tell that story by having a reunion with Morgan and having that show really focused on, having elements of like the Clear episode and stuff. I think that would be really incredible. I think there's a lot you can do there, to be honest. And so that's likely what they're working on. At least that's my prediction anyways. I think that that's probably where the next story would go. And I'll do a video talking about this either next week or probably, I'm assuming, after Comic-Con. We'll have to wait and see where all this goes here. But yeah, definitely make sure to be a subscriber if you want to get all my Walking Dead content like this, and I'll see you in the next one.